applied to many areas of your life. And here would be my way of summarizing the idea that they're talking about today is, through from the movie The Matrix, it says you can take the red pill or you can take the blue pill, right? And so it appears to be a choice between one path that you don't completely understand. What does a red pill mean for me? And a blue pill, what does that mean for me? Not completely clear. In the course, we're going to find, well, what about the path of not taking any pill at all? The path that's beyond pills. And so life will present itself that way to us. You can have the illusion called red or the illusion called B. Which one will you be happy with? And when in fact there's a real alternative that is not an illusion, and that's the one that we weren't told about. That's the one that's not taught frequently. And that's what we'll be looking at today. So, David, thank you for being our reader.
There is a tendency to think the world can offer consolation and escape from problems that its purpose is to keep. Why should this be? Because it is a place where choice among illusions seems to be the only choice, and you are in control of outcomes of your choosing. Thus you think, within the narrow band from birth to death, a little time is given you to use for you alone, a time when everyone conflicts with you, but you can choose which road will lead you out of conflict and away from difficulties that concern you not. Yet they are your concern. How then can you escape from them by leaving them behind? What must go with you, you will take with you, whatever road you choose to walk along. Be not deceived.
Okay, so red pill or blue pill, there's a tendency to think that the world can offer you consolation in one of those choices. But we are going to realize it's a choice among illusions. The world will offer you many illusions, but all of them are not really different from one another because they're all illusions. And the world will teach you that you have control of deciding which illusion you want, as if that was useful. And so, therefore, the thinking is within a very narrow band, typically defined as from your physical birth until your physical death, which can be very short and unstable. This is what the world teaches. And there, in that situation, the world says you can decide which road you want to choose as long as the framework is defined between physical birth and physical death. All of this is a form of deception. Therefore, the idea at the end, be not deceived by these offer of the red illusion or the blue illusion. Be not deceived by such things. David?
Real choice is no illusion, but the world has none to offer. All its roads but lead to disappointment, nothingness, and death. There is no choice in its alternatives. Seek not escape from problems here. The world was made that problems could not be escaped. Be not deceived by all the different names its roads are given. They have but one end, and each is but the means to gain that end, for it is here that all its roads will lead, however differently they seem to start, however differently they seem to go. Their end is certain, for there is no choice among them. All of them will lead to death. On some you travel gaily for a while before the bleakness enters, and on some the thorns are felt at once. The choice is not what the ending be, but when it comes.
So this is should not come as a shock of anybody. What is that saying? There's only two things that are inevitable: taxes and death. So herein is the problem. If we are deceived and life is defined for us as always the outcome is death, then that is a very limiting proposition. And there must be a real alternative that offers hope and a sense of transcendence beyond these choices. But the world does not teach it to you. It says here that you cannot escape from the problems here. The world was made that problems could not be escaped. And what we mean is this world view of your existence being limited to this very short period of time. That worldview in itself is so narrow and small that its problems that are within that small, tight little boundary cannot be escaped. And so there must be, if God is merciful, there must be an alternative. But you won't learn it from the teachings of the world. You must learn it elsewhere. The choice is not of regarding the teachings of the world. The choice is not what the ending will be, but when does death come? Will?
I can't help but think about separation. And, we're talking about the world we live in will traditionally talk about our lives in two ways, life and death. And the two are really not connected in Western culture in a way. It's like you live, this part happens, and then this part happens. And I think that I'm kind of reading into this, the point being made here is that it's all just one continuum.
Yeah, we would say, well, yes, it's a continuum, it's a storyline, but it has this hard stop, this ending called death and the storyline. And beyond that, you don't, within the storyline says you don't exist. And therein is the problem. It's a question about defining your existence, your being, and it's limited entirely to the idea that you only exist as long as you're in a body. And so that's a very narrow definition of existence, and one that is popularly believed in. It's what the world teaches, and leads to a sense of deception because it's not fails to acknowledge a greater narrative, the one that the Holy Spirit teaches. Let's go on, David.
There is no choice where every end is sure. Perhaps you would prefer to try them all before you really learn they are but one. The roads this world can offer seem to be quite large in number, but the time must come when everyone begins to see how like they are to one another. Men have died on seeing this because they saw no way except the pathways offered by the world, and learning they led nowhere, lost their hope. And yet this was the time they could have learned their greatest lesson. All must reach this point and go beyond it. It is true indeed, there is no choice at all within the world. But this is not the lesson in itself. The lesson has a purpose, and in this you come to understand what it is for.
Mhm. Okay, so some sub themes that go on here is the world offers no choice because the outcome is always the same. The outcome, the teachings of the world about your being do not offer alternative choices. Same outcome for them all. Men, I think of philosophers. When I read this, men have died on seeing this because when they realize that their learning led nowhere, they lost their hope. And I know some of the German philosophers like Schopenhauer, Sigmund Freud, um, Friedrich Nietzsche, and others lost their hope. They saw little to no hope in human existence. Albert Camus, Sartre, it goes on and on. And so, and yet, this was the time when they could have learned their greatest lesson. And here's the real take on the course here. When you reach this realization that the world does not offer an alternative, a worthy outcome, this is the point where you can learn your greatest lesson. And if we make this into a philosophy, all people must reach this point and go beyond it. And so the challenge is, can you go beyond the teachings of the world to the real alternative that we're going to get to in a moment? So so David, we talk about the On a Road to Nowhere, Talking Heads. This theme is mentioned many times, it turns out, in many different sections. Learning they led to nowhere, and all must reach this point. They realize the road taught by the world's narrow teachings of what life is, all must reach that point and then go beyond the road to nowhere. So this lesson has a purpose. It brings about, if you fail to go beyond it, then you lose all hope. But if you do go beyond it, the lesson has a purpose. And this is what you come to come to understand what the lesson is for. So there's a mystery here that we haven't mentioned specifically yet. And what is the lesson for? David?
Why would you seek to try another road, another person, or another place when you have learned the way the lesson starts, but do not yet perceive what it is for? Its purpose is the answer to the search that all must undertake who still believe there is another answer to be found. Learn now without despair. There is no hope of answer in the world. But do not judge the lesson that is, but begin with this. But do not judge the lesson that is but begun with this. Seek not another signpost in the world that seems to point to still another road. No longer look for hope where there is none. Make fast your learning now, and understand you but waste time unless you go beyond what you have learned to what is yet to learn.
Hmm.
For from this lowest point will learning lead to heights of happiness, in which you see the purpose of the lesson shining clear and perfectly within your learning grasp.
Okay, so this is deep here. We're talking about many of the great philosophers have reached this conclusion about the road to nowhere and lost all hope. But so, what are we to do with that knowledge? It's one, seek not yet another world. I'm sorry, seek not yet other choices that are still defined within the world's philosophy of birth to death. Stop wasting, no longer look for hope where there is none. This is actually a simple lesson to understand, but much more difficult to put into practice. Stop looking for the answers where they cannot be found. Save yourself, save your willpower, your focus, your attention for where answers can be understood and can be found. So they call it make fast your learning and understand you but waste time unless you go beyond the things that have been learned, go beyond that to what you still have yet to learn. So it's a refocus of your direction. And this is key. This is what the course is all about. You must change direction in order to learn lessons that you have not yet learned. You can't learn them by reviewing your past. From this lowest point where you reach the end of the teachings of this world, you reach the end of the learnings of the past. From this lowest point, can you begin learning anew and see the purpose of the lesson clear and that it's within your grasp? So, first thing to do is change orientation to using the power of your mind to focus on what you have yet to learn rather than what you've already taught yourself. Practicing this is vital. Easy lesson, simple lesson to understand, which requires regular practice. David?
Who would be willing to be turned away from all the roadways of the world unless he understood their real futility? Is it not needful that he should begin with this to seek another way instead? For while he sees a choice where there is none, what power of decision can he use? The great release of power must begin with learning where it really has a use. And what decision has power if it be applied in situations without choice?
Mm-hmm. So here it becomes more clear. We're talking about using the power of your ability to learn. It's up to you to direct it properly, creatively, usefully towards learning from higher power, from holy power. Know, please know that in the world, there is a culture of looking backwards. It's like looking in the rear view mirror to what has already been learned, what's already understood, and placing your power there in past learning. And so freeing ourselves from here, they call it the great release of power, begins with learning anew. Question then becomes, which teacher will you learn from? Who will be your teacher as you learn anew? This directional change is really the reason why I encourage people to do a workbook lesson every day. So you orient yourself to Holy Spirit as teacher on a daily basis. That will set your direction consistently until a habit forms.
Good point.
Okay, David, did I? Yeah, go ahead.
The learning that the world can offer but one choice, no matter what its form may be, is the beginning of acceptance that there is a real alternative instead. To fight against this step is to defeat your purpose here. You did not come to learn to find a road the world does not contain. The search for different pathways in the world is but the search for different forms of truth. And this would keep the truth from being reached.
Okay, so this is where we talk about it's a new beginning. Once you've reached the conclusion that the world cannot offer you a real alternative, then it's the beginning of acceptance that there is an alternative beyond what the world teaches. And know that the ego will attempt to fight you on this and keep you looking backwards to what is familiar and you've already, to the things your mind is already convinced are true. The ego will try to imprison you in that thought system, which will, and if you do so, it will defeat the purpose for which you are here in this world. For you didn't come to this world to find a road that, let's say, listen to this. You did not come to learn to find a road the world does not contain. The search for different pathways in the world is but a search for different forms of truth. This would keep the truth from being reached. So my interpretation is you have to be willing to expand your search beyond this world, beyond the red pill and the blue pill, or whatever other color pill comes along. You have to be willing to transcend those teachings, or else you'll revert backwards to the teachings of the world. And we've already gone over how they all end in the same way. All right, so here's my, I'm a visually oriented person and I want to, I think in terms of images. And so here's an attempt to illustrate what we're talking about. It says in the course that all learning either helps or hinders our progress to the heaven. All learning. Some will hinder you, others will help you. And therefore, there's but two directions that you can take. And you choose to go either towards heaven or away on the road to nowhere. And there's nothing else to choose. So in this illustration, you either go left towards the road to heaven, which unites you all with all other beings are united going that way, or you go to the right, which eventually you and others will all split off into your own little pathway and get into your own little separate direction. And so you either walk together on a journey that has a shared path to one reality, or you walk alone on a journey away from yourself, a separate path to nowhere. And this orientation is your real choice, is how will you orient yourself? Remember when we went over the rules for decision in chapter 30? The first foundation for that is today, I'll make no decisions alone and by myself, but instead I will join with the Holy Spirit. And if I do fall off of that, then I will do a restorative and choose once again. David?
Think not that happiness is ever found by following a road away from it. This makes no sense and cannot be the way. To you who seem to find this course to be too difficult to learn, let me repeat that to achieve a goal, you must proceed in its direction, not away from it. And every road that leads the other way will not advance the purpose to be found. If this be difficult to understand, then is this course impossible to learn, but only then. For otherwise, it is a simple teaching in the obvious.
So what is the simple teaching? To achieve a goal, we have to proceed in the direction of the goal, not away from it. And here's the thing that you didn't know, because that's an abstraction. You must proceed in the direction of the goal, not away from it. Here's the thing that you didn't realize. Every hour of the day, you're deciding what direction you're headed. And I don't mean the direction you're moving your car or your body, but the direction that you're using the power of your mind to learn and teach yourself who you are and what is your purpose, what is your function here on earth. Every day, every hour, you're making a choice about that direction. And so we therefore need to train our minds to recognize that we're making choices about our direction. And rules for decision are a very helpful framework. The workbook lessons are extremely helpful for that, so that you repeat them frequently, checking in to saying, is my direction correct here? Who am I using as my guide for the next hour of my life? Where am I looking to find myself? How am I showing up in life? And do that on a regular basis throughout the day until it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, second nature. It's like a golf swing or a tennis swing. It becomes second nature once you've mastered the habit. David?
There is a choice that you have power to make when you have seen the real alternatives. Until that point is reached, you have no choice. But you can but decide how you would choose the better to deceive yourself again. This course attempts to teach no more than that the power of decision cannot lie in choosing different forms what is still the same illusion and the same mistake. All choices in the world depend on this. You choose between your brother and yourself, and you will gain as much as he will lose, and what you lose is what is given him. How utterly opposed to truth is this, when all the lesson's purpose is to teach that what your brother loses, you have lost, and what he gains is what is given you.
It's relational. We're in this together, not separately. What you believe of others, you will believe is true for yourself. It is not a lose-lose, win-lose situation as the world would teach, but you are always, in fact, extending or sharing what you believe to be true about yourself. So, why is the course so simple? Because it attempts to teach no more than the power of decision cannot lie in making choice among illusions. That is not a hard concept to understand. It cannot lie between red pills and blue pills and other idols of this world. That power of decision cannot lie in there. You must realize that is a choice that you have power to make based on a real alternative. Until that point is reached, you have no choice. And you can but decide how best to deceive yourself. How powerful a thought is that? Until you realize there's a real alternative, you're stuck amongst illusions that would deceive you. This is why when it says earlier, I'm just restating it, men have realized this and lost all hope. That the only choices they had were but roads that lead to nowhere. And I cite Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Freud, Camus, Sartre, and others of that existentialists. They were nihilistic existentialists that really said, oh, there's really no meaning whatsoever in life. And they were thoughtful in exploring all the teachings of the world to try to find a way out, but they did so within the narrow framework of from birth to physical death. David?
I think it's fascinating if you look at, you talk about all the nihilistic thoughts and existentialists. Viktor Frankl, who suffered a terrible as we perceive it, existence, he's one that had the hope, that saw the alternative, that saw a different truth, a meaning in it.
He did. As a matter of fact, I'll do a little aside from that. Viktor Frankl was the first book by a psychologist I ever read when I was 17. And I didn't fully understand it then, but I did read it. I was part of a college philosophy course. And David, I went and read over a course of a lifetime 60 more books by psychologists. Made an effort to explore, an investment to try to find out what did they have to say about these roads and these choices that were defined within the frameworks they understood. And when it was all said and done, Viktor Frankl is the one that had the most insight and focused on the right issues of the meaning of life. And how we create meaning in our life. It all came back to Viktor Frankl. That's where I began, and it came full circle. Yeah, pretty amazing. I'm a huge fan of his. So yes, as we read earlier, all those individuals have invested great amounts of their attention and their learning and trying to figure out what's the best possible outcomes you can find in this life based on a narrow view of birth to death. And they all threw up the majority of them threw up their hands and says, we can't find anything useful worth finding. So use the power for your decision more wisely. The power of decision cannot lie in choosing amongst illusions and making the same mistake that all these other wise minds of the world have made. Must look elsewhere. You must orient yourself to a teacher that is from beyond this world. Oh, sorry. David?
He has not left his thoughts, but you forgot his presence and remembered not his love. No pathway in the world can lead to him, nor any worldly goal be one with his. What road in all the world will lead within, when every road was made to separate the journey from the purpose it must have, unless it be but futile wandering? All roads that lead away from what you are will lead you to confusion and despair. Yet has he never left his thoughts to die, without their source forever in themselves.
So, it seems like all of a sudden they're talking about this he. And the last comment they had was about the lesson's purpose is to teach that what your brother loses, you have lost. And then it says, he has not left. Oh, there's two he's here. His thoughts in other places in the Course refer to the thoughts in the mind of God. So your brother has not left the thoughts in the mind of God, but you forgot God's presence and remembered not his love. I'm interpreting here. And so we forgot the presence of God as the real alternative and sought other pathways in the world to find happiness and satisfaction and meaning. But no pathway in the world that the world provides and teaches can lead back to the presence of the Creator, nor is any worldly goal one with his. What road in all the world will lead you within to the presence of God? None. Every road was made to separate the journey from the purpose it must have. The whole purpose of the journey is to lead you within, while the world would lead you without. And so therein you have the real alternative. The real alternative is the journey within towards your being, your true self, your eternal self. It's not found in a multitude of roads that lead you out and away from yourself. And when you find the journey within, you will realize that you will remember once again the thoughts of God, his presence, his love, and that they are your true source. David?
Can I comment on the previous thing?
Of course. Go ahead. Oops.
See, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the he that they're talking about is Christ and not your brother.
Okay. There is always pronoun ambiguity in the course. So I'm open to what you're saying here because it's ambiguous often.
Yeah, I understand that. But if I understood, your brother is never capitalized.
Well, at the beginning of a sentence, he would be capitalized.
Look at the
Right.
last sentence, which is
That's
the reiteration of the first sentence.
ah, okay. So, in all fairness, and I'm not trying to dispute what your interpretation here, Helen and Ken Wapnick had to decide what to capitalize.
Okay.
You can imagine the challenge in doing that with it throughout 700 pages. So I'm never certain about whether or not the capitalization was what the author intended. Sorry to do that. So it's just there's some uncertainty there. They did the best they could.
That's what occurred to me. So I'm just saying,
Yeah,
shit.
right. So when we read it that way, yet has Christ never left his thoughts to die without their source forever in themselves. That reads perfectly sense. And so here's the interesting part where we would differentiate your brother from Christ.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. And so there would be the where it finally all comes together. All brothers are capital He because we are all members of the Christhood. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. All right, one more. I think this is our last two paragraphs. David, you're muted.
He has not left his thoughts. He could no more depart from them than they could keep him out. In unity with him do they abide, and in their oneness both are kept complete. There is no road that leads away from him. A journey from yourself does not exist. How foolish and insane it is to think that there could be a road with such an aim. Where could it go? And how could you be made to travel on it, walking there without your own reality at one with you? Forgive yourself your madness and forget all senseless journeys and all goalless aims. They have no meaning. You cannot escape from what you are, for God is merciful and did not let his Son abandon him. For what he is, be thankful, for in that is your escape from madness and from death. Nowhere but where he is can you be found. There is no path that does not lead to him.
Hmm. Interesting. You know, as you're reading that, David, based on our previous comments about is it he, your brother? Is it the Christ? Is it you? And the higher viewpoint is it's all of the above. And we introduce confusion when we so it's got to be one or the other. And we try to narrow it down to that way. So, and as you were reading this, I was seeing it that way. Who's not left his thoughts? Well, your brother hasn't left the thoughts of God's mind. Christ has not left the thoughts of God's mind. Neither have you left your thoughts. And it even says, goes on, it says, a journey from yourself away from your thoughts does not exist. This would be foolish and insane to think that there could be a road away from yourself. So therein is, we're getting into the summary here. What is the real alternative? The real alternative is a journey within yourself. All other choices appear to be outward directed into something we would call time and space and what the world has to offer. Those would be journeys to find happiness, fulfillment, your needs fulfilled, however you want to express it, out in something there, something to fill you up. Whereas we're learning the journey inward is the only way to restore a sense of your true self. And so we've all made that mistake, and make sure you grasp this final paragraph. Forgive yourself for that madness and for all the senseless journeys and goalless aims. Forgive yourself for them. They were not sins. They have no meaning at all. They were roads to nowhere. It's an emptiness. And in truth, you cannot escape from your true being, from what you are, for you have not been abandoned. And you, in fact, you are much loved and appreciated. Nowhere but where he is can you be found. There is no path that does not lead to him. I suspect that that is referring to the creator source of all things, for just reference his son. God did not let his son abandon him. Yeah, so there's nowhere that you can go and be found where God is not. There is no path that does not lead back. There's no true path that does not lead you back to the source of your being, which is the creator. Jerry, you had your hand up? You're on mute. There you go.
You mean,
No, I don't think I did.
Richie?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did. I meant Richie. Sorry, Jerry.
What I'm on to something and I'm off to something because I lost it because it cannot be grasped, only understood.
Yes.
That's what I'm coming to. It's a journey beyond words, a journey. The words may start it, the he, the him, the God, whatever you want to call it, but that's not the finish line, is what I'm hearing, what I hear, what I'm hearing in myself.
Yeah.
And that is just the acknowledgement, the landing spot that goes beyond words. It cannot be translated. For me, if I do translate it, then I'm limiting it to what I know. I don't know. I think I don't know the whole the Carlos Castaneda when he talked about all roads lead nowhere, and I believe that's what he was saying. I know I needed a starting point, but my starting point, once I do this work, is not the finish line. It's beyond that. It's
Yes.
just an acknowledgement. It's like there is air. I don't have to see air in order to know there's air.
Mhm.
It's just an acknowledgement. So for me, I had to go beyond
Mhm.
Anything that I learned, anything and everything, and I still get back. I get back to me. I believe. Last night I was reading something about the Greek philosophers, and two words came up. One was atomist, atoms, Everything is an atom, made of atoms, and indivisible, meaning there is no separation.
Hmm.
And what I've been working towards is my own inner I want to separate, but I can't separate because I can't get I didn't feel that if I did that and did my journey, that I'd be ridiculed, laughed at. That's why there's so many different religions and philosophies and take this and that. It's like I still get back to myself. And once I do that, I don't need to see in order to believe. Just it's an intuition.
Mhm.
It's more of intuitive. I don't even want to use the word thought, but it's actually, for me, it's a process of elimination. And if I can stay with it, that's great. Unfortunately, I don't. But now, when it does happen, I've got the tools through the lessons to see it, to spot it.
Right, right, right. Very good.
Thank you.
That's beautiful, Richie. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of us have that same issue, Richie, of not staying with it. We get oriented and then we lose track. Hourly reminders, workbook lessons that bring us back every hour.
Right.
Yeah, because otherwise the mind will wander back into the familiar and the self-made solutions, thinking we already know what we need to know. That's great. Well, that's all the reading we're going to do for today, folks. And we will cover this material again tomorrow on Sunday. And then on Monday, we will do section 3 of this chapter. And next week, you don't want to miss next weekend, which is the section that for me opened up the entire Course in Miracles. So let's just say this is my experience of it, is it all became clear what the Course was trying to say. And it builds on what we read today. It further illuminates at another dimension of what we read today. So you want to be sure and catch that next weekend. So David, thank you for reading. Thank you all for joining in from wherever you are, and have a beautiful day. And remember to make no decisions by yourself. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, David. Thanks, Jonica.
Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly.
Jonica.
Thanks,
See you next
Jonica.
week.